what have you learned now? What would you go back and tell your former self at that point?
Uh, I would tell, I think I would tell her what I would tell anybody. And I think anyone in business knows. And this is important too in when you think about branding and you think about marketing. Um, and I did figure it out. So that's why I was able to get to where I am. But that is just to keep being yourself.
Welcome to the American Med Spa Association podcast, Medical Spa Insider. This week, AmSpa founder Alex Thiersch is speaking with storytelling expert and author Kindra Hall.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is Medical Spa Insider. I am Alex Thiersch. I'm the founder and CEO of AmSpa. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special guest on our AmSpa hotline. We have Kindra Hall, who is a speaker and best-selling author, and she does a bunch of things. And the reason we're having her on is because we're very excited. She's going to be doing one of our keynote speeches at the Medical Spa show, which I guess is about in a week for those of you who are listening to this, April 11th. And she's going to be on the main stage kicking it off in front of the main audience. And the reason we have her, Kindra, again, I don't know if I'm sure you don't remember me, but I did see you speak. Can you hear that siren? That's
No, I don't
okay.
even, but it's probably because I just don't even hear him anymore. I'll probably have him too. Who knows if my door's going to buzz? That's how it goes.
Yeah, no, so like sirens come by all the time in the city. But
Yeah.
Kindra, I saw you in Nashville a couple of years ago, and I thought what you had to say was amazing, and the way that you put it together. I remember at first, I was like, what is she going to be talking about? And by the end, I was totally enthralled and entranced because the idea of storytelling in both your brand building, your marketing, everything that you do with your business is super, super important. It's something that I do just terrible, not good at it. But I know people that have been really effective. And so we wanted to bring you in to talk to our audience, med spa owners, med spa providers. These are a lot of medical providers, injectors, who really are building their own personal brands. And a lot of the brands that they're building on are focused on themselves. So all that said, I know you've got a couple of books that you've put out. One of which I saw Forbes said maybe the most valuable book you'll read, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
wow. You should have that tattooed to your arm or something.
I was thinking about
Um,
that.
but anyway, welcome, Kindra. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'd love to hear a little, kind of your bio for the folks who are listening.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I am so happy to be here and really, really looking forward to being together in Vegas in just a week or so. I've been looking forward to this. And I mean, a bio, right? Like you pretty much said it. So I suppose if you were to give me a singular title, it would be storytelling expert. All of my work and research has been in the power of storytelling for individuals, stories for sales, marketing, branding, and even the stories that we tell one-on-one with people and how that can impact their decisions. And it's always fascinating for me too. And I appreciate your honesty when you said, when you came out on stage, I was thinking, what is she going to be talking about? And it's really the most thrilling thing in my life to see people, whether it's real time in the audience or afterwards, realize the power their stories have and then to embrace that and use it. And the potential is really endless.
Well, for sure. And I don't know if you feel this way too, but I feel like the whole idea of storytelling in marketing and brand building and storytelling for corporate purposes is something that's not necessarily new, but it's gained a lot of new traction recently. There's a lot of books, there's classes that you can take, there's things that come up that I've been popping up on my Instagram quite a bit. And I know you've been kind of at this for longer than that, but what's the like this idea of storytelling in business, like what's the history of that? Has that been around for a long time? And are we seeing kind of a renaissance or a resurgence of it? Or is it always been there and just maybe not really taken advantage of? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that we have seen, I would say as early as maybe 2011. I want to say I saw a quote by Gary Vaynerchuk mentioned something about telling your story. Seth Godin had mentioned that marketing isn't about the things that you sell, it's about the stories you tell. But they were more like, I even think Richard Branson said something, but they were kind of more like one-off quotes.
Yeah.
And then over time, it started to rise in popularity. Now there's storytelling classes, there are storytelling positions, which I'm thrilled about because, as you alluded to, I've been at this for a lot longer than since 2011. There's also a problem with that in that when everybody's talking about something, it implies that we're also then doing it or applying this concept. And I think that's probably, for better or worse, storytelling has become a popularized concept in business. And at the same time, just being aware of it doesn't necessarily mean we're executing on it. And so that's really where I see my role. And I'm sure you felt in the room at the event when we were there together that it's like, okay, you've heard about this, but now let's figure out how to actually use it to our advantage and why.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's easier said than done. You make it look very easy when you're out there. I can tell you, I've tried to build some of my talks around stories, and they usually don't do great because really all I can think about is talking about my dogs or the Iowa Hawkeyes where I went to college or something like that. Nothing super exciting. But your talk at our event is stories that stick: the irresistible power of strategic storytelling.
Mhm.
Give us a kind of a high level view of what you're going to be talking about, what you hope folks should take away from this, because if it's anything like the one that I saw, it's a pretty captivating talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's changed over the years and it matters who the people are in the room. And especially as med spas, like there are so many stories to be told. And not telling them is just a huge missed opportunity. So if I were to give you like the really, really high level, we'll start without giving too much away, but we'll start with why storytelling is a skill worth investing in. And I think that, and you mentioned it, you said that I make it look easy on stage, which I appreciate. My daughter's a ballerina, and one day we were watching, I think it was like a Christmas special, and Mariah Carey was singing and Misty Copeland was dancing, was doing ballet. And my son said, "That looks easy." And my daughter said, "That's what ballerinas are supposed to do. Make something that is so hard look so easy," which is fine when you're just going to be enjoying the art. But I want you to be able to apply it, not just enjoy it. And it really starts with some honesty. And that is that, yeah, great storytelling, strategic storytelling, stories that are going to expand your brand, bring in new clients, help that word of mouth, just like viral attraction is going to require investment on your part. It's going to require thinking in a new way, in a way that we haven't been taught. We don't, for all the like storytelling classes that might be available in business school, we're still missing the art of a story. So I want to start with why storytelling works and to kind of give you a picture of the ROI of getting good at it, because I kind of feel like you have to trust that that's there in order to like take on a new thing, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about some of the misconceptions and common errors that people make when they think they're telling a story, but they're not. And then I want to get real applicable. Like I said, it's not my goal to come to this event. I know you're all taking your valuable time out of your spas to travel and be there. I want to make sure that our time together is worth it. So to leave with some actionable strategies, things you can do when you leave the event, put right into practice. Very specific strategies, places you should start looking for your stories. How do we craft compelling stories? Where are the first 3 places you should be telling your stories? So you walk away with like a blueprint for making this happen. And that's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, we don't even really need to do it. This has just been perfect.
It's over.
So play this podcast. No, I can't wait to see it because one question I had when I was preparing for this is what, and I don't want you to, give away your entire talk here, but
Yeah.
I remember like back when I was a kid, and not even then, like even recently, there are some people who just seem to be inherently good
Yeah.
at telling stories. Like I remember my grandfather would tell stories, and I try to tell a story, and I stutter, I spit a little bit, sometimes drool, like it comes out like right. It doesn't, and it's never as interesting to other people as I feel like it is to me. And I'm curious, is there like how frequently do you see really good storytellers, and what's the power behind that and the impact behind that? Is there a way to measure that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are ways to measure that. You can measure that in just you tell a story, and whether it's in person or it's on social media or it's even in a brochure, whatever those message touch points are that you have in your place of business or that you use as part of your marketing strategy. Those are all opportunities for stories to be told, and you can measure the reach. You can measure how much more easily someone says, yes, I want this treatment after a consultation, how many more consultations you get if you're talking about consultations using a story. And I would say that, and this is really important, it's a big misconception that storytelling is a talent. And certainly there are people who have natural abilities that are more inclined to the qualities that we see as necessary for being an engaging storyteller, if you will. However, it is also a skill. It is something that you can, with intention and determination, which is something that I know everyone in that room, everyone listening has, that you can practice over time and get better at, right? And so it's one of the big frustrations I have is when people say, well, I'm just not a good storyteller. And the thing is imagine, so one thing that we do know is that stories are one of the most persuasive people moving opportunities you have, right? Like the greatest leaders were storytellers, the greatest companies, Disney, whoever it is, it is something that makes things happen. And so if you're saying I'm not a good storyteller, and you're essentially opting out of what could be the single greatest way to draw people to you and move them into action or get them to say yes, that is available. So what a huge, like, why would you do that to yourself?
I do that
so
to
yeah.
myself, so it's just the way that
What was that?
I said I do that to myself all the time though. So it's totally
Yeah, that's just normal. That's just the way you are. So yeah, it is a skill that needs to be practiced, that it does take a little bit of time. Like it's going to be hard to pull. It's not always easy to pull a story out of thin air. Some people are listening to this podcast right now and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have the story of this person. I have this story that happened, and they're full of stories and they just have to figure out where to tell them. There are other people, and I've had this happen where I'm like, shoot, I need a story that does this. And it takes a while before you're able to find them. But being able to stay the course and trust that once you find that story, the story can make the difference. That's what we're shooting for here.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait to hear it. So interesting what you said. I was looking at your website because I was curious how somebody gets into the storytelling business, or the teaching tellers how to tell stories, or the impact of that. It's not something that you would think most people would kind of stumble upon. But then I was at your website, and there's an anecdote about when you were younger, and I think you told a story, and you maybe in the 90s in front of like third graders or something.
Yeah.
Put like what you were going to read aside, and you just kind of told it off the cuff, and that was according to that was kind of the start of you stumbling upon this. Tell me about that. Like, how did you get into this as far as learning about how to tell stories? Were you innately good at it your whole life? And then the second part to that question, which I want to get into, is how did you figure about and go about monetizing that? Because that's a lot of
Yeah.
things that people have ideas about, and they just have trouble figuring out how to put it into action.
Yeah. I would say, I'm one of those people who my career found me. It just did. It's true. I told my first story. I was 11. It was an assignment for fifth grade.
Mhm.
And we were supposed to read a book to like a room full of third graders. And I got into the classroom and it was at the end of the day. It was at the end of the school year. It was pure chaos. And I looked out and I was like, there is no way they're not gonna, this is really awkward. This is so uncomfortable. So I put the book down and just started telling the story. And it was very clear in that moment that like I had found something. And maybe it was a little bit of power. Like I was a little power hungry at 11 because then I was immediately rewarded. Not only in that classroom, because when I told the story, it was like 3 sentences in, and suddenly all those third graders were literally in the palm of my hand. I could have made them jump. I could have made them cry. I could have made them buy something. I didn't have anything to sell. So I was immediately in the moment rewarded. And then even more so, just a few days later, I didn't go back to fifth grade. I instead was on tour. So they had me, the principal, my fifth grade teacher, had me go into every single classroom in the school to tell my story. And people were just in awe. They were so excited about this story. And I remember thinking, and you're in fifth grade. I mean, my kids have both now finished fifth grade, but that's like the first year where you're like, how do I feel like I'm getting lost somewhere. Like who am I? Like, how do I make my voice heard? Which I think is a question that even as adults, especially as entrepreneurs, right? We're still like in that fifth grade mindset of like, wow, what is my big differentiator? And I remember thinking, this is so easy. Like, all I have to do is tell a story and then I'm suddenly known, right? And it was just like, it was such a, I don't know that I've ever like fully admitted that, but it was exactly the thing I needed. What's that thing that they call in like Greek mythology? Deus Maxima or whatever. It was like the thing that came down and saved me. And that would have been enough. But then throughout the rest of even my childhood, I had little mentors along the way that I believe a lot in the power of the universe. You told me I could swear on the podcast, but otherwise, instead, I'm just going to talk about the power of the universe. That's my unconventional approach here. But like
Yep.
different mentors, different people, different teachers continuing to nudge me on that path. And so in high school, I competed on the speech team. When I got to college, my senior year, I signed up for an independent. Oh, no, that's not even what happened. Oh my gosh. Do you really want to hear the story? Like, I'm going to go deep into this story because, so I got to college and I remember, so I'd been telling stories on the speech team. I got to college and I really wanted to meet boys. And there was this talent show. And my college was a small Lutheran college in northern Minnesota that's known for its choir. And I wanted to audition for this talent show, but I can't sing. And that's really the only talent that mattered at my college. But I remembered that I could like tell stories. And I thought if I got into the talent show, I could meet boys. So I auditioned by telling a story. And then when I got in, I realized I was going to have to tell a story and how embarrassing that would be. And then I got to the talent show. I told my story. I thought I was going to be shunned and no one would ever talk to me again. And then the next day, I was in the cafeteria and there was this college the senior soccer player who's just beautiful. And he's like, "Are you the girl who was telling a story last night?" And I looked at him and said, and he said, "It was great." And I said, "That was me. I told that story." Right. So it was, yeah, like, what did you think of it? It was good. It was good. But I kept having these moments. And then my senior year of college, I signed up for an independent study course. I had to turn in a project at the end of the year. So I decided to study storytelling in a local hospital system. And that was the first time that I started to be suspicious that stories were at work in organizations. It was a hospital. I went in, I interviewed like 30 nurses in 2 different groups and had them tell me their stories, their experiences. I recorded them and then I coded them based on who the stories involved. Was it nurses to nurses, nurses to doctors, nurses to patients? And did those stories, were they positive, negative, or neutral? And what did we learn between, the negative stories? Were there more of those? And how much you can learn. We talk a lot about company culture, how much you could learn about the stories that are or are not told about the health of a culture, and then what you can do about it. And that was when I really started to, and really it was just a whim. I had to hand in an assignment. And I was like, what am I going to hand in? And I just happened to find my way into this willing audience to let me interview them. And so it kind of continued that way until then I got into, I know this is the storyteller. The next question you're going to ask is there such a thing as too long of a story? And there is, and I'm exhibiting it right now. This is what you shouldn't do.
I don't think so. Because I have so many questions. Like, honestly,
you told me.
We could make this a couple hours. Like, first of all, what was the story you told in 5th grade?
It was called The Giant's Big Toe. It was like an adaptation on Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay. And you were just telling the story like from the book, and it was just the way that you told it, just like captivated.
Yeah, I like put characters to it. Like the giant, it was much more about, fairy tales and folklore at that point. And the giant had a big bad voice, and the toe talked like this. And they went through the fields and he went up the branches. Like it was very expressive, let's just say. And quite frankly, that's what I was doing. That's what I did in elementary school. Those were the kinds of stories I was telling competitively on the high school speech team. That was the kind of story that I told on the stage in college at the talent show. And for a while, I would go to, at the same time, I would go to storytelling festivals. I went to a storytelling conference and storytelling retreats where I thought stories were telling stories on stages at festivals or in schools. And that's all I thought it was. And I remember I would have been a freshman in college at this point. I was at the festival, the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee for the first time. And my mother came with me because I was too young. I couldn't rent a car. And I remember leaving, we were in the airport shuttle, and she said, Kindra, you could do this. You could be a storyteller. And I said, what? I'm just going to tell stories for the rest of my life? Like I was so, because at that time I did not see, I wanted to wear high heels. Like I wanted a serious job. I was going to college for communications, whatever that meant. I was planning probably to do marketing. And it was a while before I realized that this actually could be a thing.
Yeah. So, and how did that manifest itself? Because actually first, before we go on, the beautiful soccer player, did you get like a date with him? Was that?
Oh yeah, we dated, and then we went on a couple dates. We saw The Sixth Sense in the theater. It was like a dinner theater, so they also had like chicken fingers. I mean, it wasn't a glamorous life. And then he graduated and ghosted me, which wasn't hard to do because we didn't have cell phones, and so he just didn't tell me his mom's phone number. That's so that's all it was.
Yeah. But at what point, it's very different to have a skill, and I'm glad you talked about, going to conferences, things. I had that question too. Like, are there ways people can learn additional skills?
Yeah.
But then it's very different from being interested in it, and even having your mom say, "Hey, you could do this," to taking a step and saying, "Okay, I'm going to make a living as a professional speaker who talks about stories," and just being you seem to be, pretty natural with your ability to talk in front of people, which helps.
Mhm.
But at what point did you say, this is something I could make money off of, and I'm going to start
Yeah.
actually doing this? And how long did that process take?
Yeah. Well, I finished college. I got my master's degree. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. When I finished my master's degree, I was a
And what
beer
was your
cart
master's in? What did you get that in?
organizational communications and management, and my thesis was storytelling and organizational socialization. So I was still studying. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always been, it's fascinating to me. Like, this is how I see the world. And I was a beer cart girl for a while on the golf course, and then I got a job as a director of marketing and then VP of sales for a small company. And it was at that time, and I thought, okay, I've done it. I have the serious job. I can wear high heels to work. Like, this is it. I can say I don't have to worry about the storyteller anymore, like speaking in libraries, because I knew that wasn't really, reading at children's books. That just wasn't what I wanted. I knew it wasn't right for me. And then here I am, like, at this company doing marketing and sales. And I remember getting so frustrated because marketing was about the innovative technology and the ingredients and even like before and after pictures, because it was a natural health company, and special pricing and, like membership, blah, blah, blah. And it was so, I was like, none of this, it, it works, but it doesn't work as well as it could. And I kept going back and finding the stories and finding the stories and telling the stories. And um, eventually I did decide, I'm like, you know what? I just need to, I'm just gonna, and at that point I had gotten married. I was frustrated at work. So I'm like, I'm going to leave this job and I am going to become a professional storyteller. And I had no idea what that was. I thought for a while I wrote wedding vows for people. I would interview the bride, but they weren't vows. They were wedding stories. I would interview the bride. I would interview the groom, and I would write stories that they could read at their wedding. And I would spend hours and hours and hours doing this and charging like $100. I'm like, well, this is not sustainable. And then I was working behind the scenes. So I started working for different nonprofits and helping them tell their stories. So either at big gala events where they had different people telling their stories on stages to raise funds, or even something as small as silent auctions. And for each one of the auction items, having a story there that tells the story of what this item is, and the watching the donations double and the bids for the auction items just go off the charts. And so then it became a matter of, and then I started doing individual consulting for brands, business owners. And then I wanted to scale. And originally, because I thought, wait, people, and I actually had one of my clients say, if you can teach people how to do what you're doing for me, you'll have a business. And that's when I decided I needed to figure out how to scale.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's
and so,
that's said than done with what you're doing, because you have a very individual skill and you're teaching individual companies and people, right? So
yeah.
how'd you do that? What was the big break? Or
Well,
what?
I thought that I would do it because then I knew, yeah, if I could teach people how to do this, and of course, my goal is more people need to know how to do this. Like, this is the secret. And if I can teach them how to do it, then more people will be doing it and it'll be amazing, right? They won't have to hire me. So my first thought was I would go into digital courses. And by digital, I mean, at the time it was DVDs and workbooks. So and at this point I was a mother of two. 2 kids under 2. So there was a lot going on just personally. But I developed a 2-part course, DVDs, workbooks. I launched it into the world, thought I was going to make it big. And in the first week, I sold 0. And then I sold 1. And it was really depressing.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I thought, okay, this isn't the way. But in the process of putting together this course, I took what I innately knew how to do and put it on paper, put it on DVD. And now I knew how to talk about what I knew how to do. And that's when I realized maybe I could just go talk to people about how to do this.
And you had a structure, right? You had a structure of what your potential business would be. And it's almost like you did a business plan and then put it down on DVD. Do you still have those DVDs?
I do. I have, yeah, but I don't have a DVD player, so I can't watch them. But we pulled the content off, and now at least one of those courses is available on my website. But you can like download it. It's a digital download.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
it would be curious to, I mean, what's changed between then, your first kind of DVD, and what you're like, what have you learned now? What would you go back and tell your former self at that point?
I would tell, I think I would tell her what I would tell anybody. And I think anyone in business knows. And this is important too when you think about branding and you think about marketing. And I did figure it out. So that's why I was able to get to where I am. But that is just to keep being yourself. Because there is, from a storytelling at that time, when I started speaking about storytelling, nobody knew what it was. Nobody, like I would send emails to people. I sent 600 emails over the course of 6 weeks to different events and organizers saying, I speak about strategic storytelling. Let me come speak for your luncheon. And they were like, no, that's not what, like, and like you said, like, what are you even storytelling? Like nobody wanted to spend an hour listening to someone talking about storytelling. And so I really had to keep moving forward in that way. And then it's definitely a man's world, the business of keynote speaking. And so that was also challenging too, to be a woman in this man's world. And I would watch other speakers at videos, and most of them were men. And I was like, how are they walking around on the stage so easily? And it's because they were wearing flats and I was wearing heels, like it was to continuously be yourself was the number one thing. And then I think the other thing that I would say that I've learned, and that I always remind myself of, is that it really is about the person in the audience, right? And the possibility of, and I'm sure, in all of our works, right? It can get monotonous. You're going in, you're doing, injections, facial, whatever it is. And you're like, oh, but when you think about what these things that you do just as a result of who you are and your training and your passion and what you care about, what you can give to others, as long as I stayed there, the work just continued to be really exciting.
Did you always want to be on stage, be like a speaker, or be in like show business, or?
Yeah, I think so. I remember I was in like the church choir, and I had to have been like 5 years old, and we sang at the like Christmas concert, the Christmas service. And I distinctly remember running back to my chair after singing, and my jacket was hung over. It was like this lavender jacket. It was hung over the back of my chair, and being so excited that I ran back to my chair and just bit my jacket. And I just was like, just because I knew I couldn't scream in church. And I just sat there and bit my jacket and screamed because it was just so magical. So yeah, I think that was, yeah.
It's awesome. Well, I mean, that's where the saying, bite your jacket comes in.
It is. It's a common phrase that we hear. Just go ahead and bite your jacket.
Do you ever get nervous going out in these stages? Because I know there's, so there'll be 2,500 people at our conference watching, but I mean, you've been in front of bigger audiences. Like, do you still get nervous, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, for a while I had it was very dysfunctional nerves. It was, like you don't earlier on where it said they don't need to hear this. This is still when I was trying to like prove to people that no, you need to know how to do this. And eventually that crossed over where I was more confident that people needed to know this and they were more excited to know it. And there was still some dysfunctional, like, oh my gosh, imposter syndrome. You don't know, you're not going to be able, you don't, you're not a financial advisor. They're going to see right through you. And then having to remind myself, I don't need to be a financial advisor to speak to financial advisors. They're not storytellers. I am. We can meet in the middle and have a really great experience that way. Now, there isn't so much of that dysfunction as there are it's just excitement. And so it is nerves, but I'm very quick to understand those nerves of what has like, oh my, I can't believe I get to do this. And, spending the time to get to know the organization and get a sense for who the people are, it's even more exciting to think of all the ways that their stories could make a difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's exciting to hear, and it's contagious because you seem very passionate about. Obviously, you've been doing this since you were in fifth grade. I mean, this is so well. So you've reached a certain level of success. I mean, people, you're getting paid to go up in front of large corporations to talk about your craft. You're consulting and teaching people. What's next? What do you want to be when you grow up?
I told you, I don't know. I don't know. People just keep, see, this is the universe just keeps wanting to ask me this question. Because I feel like it's the wrong answer to say, I could do this forever. Like if what was that?
Why is that the wrong answer?
I don't know. I feel like what I think I should say, and maybe I should take my own advice to just be myself, or like the answer that people expect is, well, next I want to have my own talk show. I want to like you're not supposed to say, if I could just do this forever, I would be so happy, feel so blessed. So I know there's always new levels of serving people, and there's new aspects of storytelling to explore. But I don't know if I could do this forever.
I think
I would.
I mean, that's a great answer. I think it's inspiring. We're in an industry, and I'm not sure how much you know about kind of the business of it, but med spas and medical aesthetics practices are growing extremely fast. The whole industry is growing fast, and there's been a lot of investment, M&A, where there's private equity coming in and they're buying and they're consolidating. And it seems to me a lot of the times when people get into the business, they often do it because they want to make people feel better about themselves. They want to make people feel more confident. And invariably they get to a point where they start saying, well, I'm going to expand to 3, I'm going to expand to, the Midwest, and then I'm going to go nationwide. And sometimes, like when I find myself talking to people, it's like, there's nothing wrong with having one location and being, not to say that that's kind of where you are, because I think you've gotten a little bit bigger than that, but it kind of using that as the context, like,
yeah,
I'd be doing that. Like that's what you should do, right?
Yeah, that's where I think that we have a lot of, in so many different aspects and avenues of our life, a lot of what we think we should say. I mean, this is really the first time that I've ever said, when someone has asked me that question, like, if I could. Now, the only reason I hesitate is because I think, well, can I actually just do this, or do I have to expand in order to remain relevant or in order to whatever. But there are so many shoulds. And I think that the more often we can give ourselves permission to be like, I actually love this. And to know, all right, am I saying this out of fear because I think I can't expand to the Midwest? Am I afraid of that? And so I say that I just want this? Or is this genuinely what I want?
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
a really good
mean,
point. I think, self-doubt can masquerade as, comfort, right? So you want to
yeah,
stay in your comfort zone.
yeah,
And
yeah.
life
I
is
mean,
lived on the outsides of the comfort zones, on the margins.
yep. And I think it's okay. And there's seasons in life too, right? It could be that this season, having what you have right now works for your life. I would say that I did make a mistake in my career, and that is, it wasn't a mistake, but it was like it was just the nature of the beast. It was 2018, 2019.
Mhm.
And things just went crazy for me. I mean, I was speaking 10 times a month. I had 2 suitcases packed at all times. And keep in mind, I love my job. But at this point, I now have 2 kids in elementary school. And then on top of it, we had moved from beautiful suburban Arizona to an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was a huge adjustment for our family, and I was gone for a lot of it. And um, it was intense. And
Yeah.
I think that, I was serving my business in the way that I needed. It was one of those. But now I do know that I'm in there's seasons, and then there was 2020, which was its own season. But constantly, like right now, the needs of my family are different than they were in 2018. In 5 years, they're going to be different. And so I think there's something to say, and that's one of the beauties of being an entrepreneur. And one of the challenges is you have to make those decisions. No one's going to make that for you. So I think there's power in recognizing, like, okay, maybe I don't want to expand right now, or maybe right now is the time to do it.
Right. Well, and I think what you said is true, because a lot of it is just timing. I mean, it's circumstance, right? I mean, but what you've been through, I think, is what a lot of entrepreneurs go through. Is it's a lot of time away. It's you make a lot of sacrifices, and then at some point that kind of comes full circle, and you think, all right, well, what's next? What do I want to do? Do I want to continue to do this, or can I, be a little bit more, a little more home, a little bit more, things like that.
Yep.
It's tough. It's not easy. So you have I could talk first of all, I could ask you questions all day. So
I know. I was
just
like, oh, that was not planned, but there we go. This is not what they signed up for. Don't worry. We're not talking about any of this stuff when we get
no,
together.
I don't want to bore people with all my questions. But so you have 2 books that you put out. And one is Stories That Stick: How Storytelling Can Captivate Customers, Influence Audiences, and Transform Your Business. Was that your first book
That was my first book. Yep.
One that I think I have that book.
Yeah. And that's what we'll be talking about. It's those, like, the story strategies for business. That's
Okay.
what we'll be talking about in Vegas. Yeah.
And then the second one is Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. What's that?
That book is my second book, and that is a different angle of storytelling, which is equally as fascinating and important to me. And that is about the stories we tell ourselves. So humans by nature are storytelling creatures, right? And so often now that we are thinking about storytelling, we're thinking about the stories that we tell others and especially in business, to influence them, to communicate our brands, etc. And as storytelling creatures by nature, we are also all day, every day, telling ourselves stories. And these stories they're invisible, they're automatic, and they have the ability to shape our lives because they influence, without us knowing it, the actions we take. And even some of the things that we were just talking about, the stories that we have, those should stories, like, well, I should do this, right? And it influences our actions. However, if these stories are invisible, that means that we're kind of like letting our lives be dictated by an invisible force that has a lot of power. So that second book is all about the stories we tell ourselves, the power that they have, and how you can take back control of those stories and make drastic changes in the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I mean, thoughts lead to actions, right? And feelings lead,
Exactly.
and the more you're feeling certain things. And so pretty much you're saying, in some ways, and I'm sure I'm dumbing this down, but kind of the daydreaming, the things that you're doing during the course of your day, what you're thinking about in terms of what your trajectory is, if you can sculpt that in a way that can start to lead you on that path in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, and even in more simplistic terms, right? So there was a time where I was just really having a hard time exercising. Like I just couldn't get myself to go. And every time I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go exercise. And then I'd put on my athleisure and just wear it as an outfit instead of as an exercise tool. And I needed to change that action, and nothing else was nothing was doing it. And so I decided to go to my stories. And so my alarm would go off. It would be time for me to go exercise. I would do the whole thing of, I should just stay in bed, or, oh, I think my foot hurts, or whatever. And instead, I had a set of stories that I would tell myself about how great I felt when I worked out. Now, these aren't affirmations. I wasn't just saying, but you feel so good after you exercise, or you never regret going on a run, or whatever it was. No, I told myself the story of the time my husband and I went to this wedding, and I'd been really consistent with my exercise, with eating well. I looked phenomenal. I wore this royal blue dress. I remember exactly what I was wearing. I remember the shoes. I remember walking into this wedding, and it was a wedding of two beautiful people. Everyone attending were beautiful people. And I remember this woman coming up to me and saying, you know that you are the most beautiful person in this room. And that feeling, right? It wasn't like that feeling was like, oh, and then I had another story of when I was in graduate school and I was dating this kid called Pool Boy. He had a name, but I only ever called him Pool Boy. And I remember, and I met him because I was always swimming laps at the pool, and I was exercising, I was eating really well. And he came to pick me up for our first date. And I remember I opened the door of my crappy apartment, and he just stood in the doorway. I can still see his face. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. And he just said, wow. So even as I tell you these stories, right? And as like vain as they sound, or what, it doesn't matter. I don't care what they sound like to you. When I told myself those stories,
right,
as I was laying in bed, I don't know if I want to get up. Suddenly, I could get up and go work out. Yeah. And then that's all I needed. I just needed the story to lead to the action to get me to where. And then it just took a couple more repetitions. And suddenly I was back to exercising regularly. So that's where you can see like a real, like it is the actual stories and we all have these stories. And they don't have to be big, but they can change everything. And one last thing, I don't know if you know this, I have a third book coming out in May.
I didn't know that.
I know, that's right. So
called the Pool Boy.
It is called The Pool. No, that's going to be. Maybe I should start writing fiction. That's my next thing. No, for the third book, we're going back to my storytelling and business roots. It's called The Story Edge, and it's about how leaders can harness the power of stories to win in business. So definitely a leadership focused book, and really about the importance of. I know things are moving so fast and technology is evolving and everything's so crazy and da. But really, if leaders aren't still focusing, you're still talking to humans, you're still leading humans, you're still working with humans. And if you lose sight of that, everything can fall apart. And the thing that connects humans, like the original human currency, the original human algorithm, were stories. And so some strategies and perspectives for leaders in this modern age to go with the newest, oldest strategy there is, which is storytelling.
That's a good way to put it. It is kind of the oldest algorithm. I mean, that's interesting because it's true, right? That's how it started. That's how everything's right. All the connections, that's awesome. So thank you so much for taking time today to talk to me. And I can't wait to meet you in person, and I can't wait to see your talk. And for those of you who are listening, I think you're going to absolutely love Kindra and all the things that she has to say. She's got an amazing presentation. You've just gotten a snippet of it on this, and I think hopefully that's enough to kind of get everyone interested. But April 11th through 14th, which will be in about a week from now when this drops, which is what we say in the podcast business when it drops. And then you'll be there at the opening session, and maybe we'll get you to stick around a little bit to talk with some folks afterwards, because I can't wait for people to meet you. They're going to eat you up. It's going to be amazing.
I can't wait. I've been looking forward to it. And we're going to have a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. Can't wait. Where can folks find more about you and your books if they want to buy a book? Where's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So all the books are available where books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you're an Audible reader, I read all the books to you. The Story Edge doesn't come out until May 7th. So that means the benefit is we are in pre-launch mode. So if you go to, I think the website is thestoryedgebook.com. I hope that's the name of the book, and you pre-order it. You can enter your info there and you get some bonuses. Otherwise, my standard website is kindrahall.com, Kindra with an I. And then I'm on Facebook, Instagram, where I tell a lot of stories. So you can keep up with me. We can get to know each other before I get there and then stay in touch afterwards.
Awesome. Can't wait. Thank you so much, Kindra. I appreciate your time. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a cool meeting, and I'm glad you'll be there.
Well, thank you, Alex. This has been great, and I can't wait to see you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Medical Spa Insider podcast. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel for future videos and podcasts. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, please check our description below.